Good evening, Mr. Powers. I will murder you with laser wolves.
Hey, everybody. It's the All That Chazz Stress Relief Podcast. Because, wow, we need some stress relief. Stat.
So I started recording this podcast, and it went to 20 minutes, and I realized that I wasn't being succinct enough. I needed to compress the information. So let's get right down to it, because I'm Robert Chute, Robert Chazz Chute, if you're reading my fiction. My website is allthatchazz.com. Chazz is with two Z's, two Z's if you're nasty. I wrote a book called Do the Thing, in which I talk about stress management techniques, time management techniques, energy management techniques, and pain management techniques. And let's get right to it, and I will compress the information. There will be supplementary information on the in the show notes on the website. You can check out all the links at allthatchazz.com. And now, the short version. I do fill out some of the information on the blog on the website, but first thing I want to talk about briefly this time is screw you money and saying no to screw you money. When you look at very successful people, Bill Gates comes to mind, Steve Jobs comes to mind, Elon Musk comes to mind. People who are very successful, they get to a point where they make a ton of money, and yet they keep on going. When you see these people going, well, he's a billionaire, and many times over, why does he have to be more of a billionaire? And that is a question that is a legitimate question as long as you're assuming that all work is awful. But I suspect those guys enjoyed or are enjoying themselves. When you look at successful people, their focus is not on screw you money. In fact, screw you money, you know what that is. This is the polite way of saying it's the money you get so you can, like lottery winner money, where you get enough that you can tell everybody to go away, tell your boss what you think of them on the way out, and light the place on fire as you go. And that's not, you can't get there from here if your mindset is, I hate my job. And it's okay to hate your job. I have had a lot of jobs that I hated. However, don't let the job that you hate become your career. Make your career something that you enjoy, or at least like, because you're going to do so much. You're going to spend so much time doing it. So, people who are successful, they're not focusing on, I can't wait to get to the point where I say no. Although saying no can be a powerful thing and a useful thing as a stress management technique, when you're looking in your career and the big picture stuff, we have to say yes a lot. Are you available for that meeting? Yes. Can you come in early? Yes. Can you stay late? Yes. Can you do this? Can you do that? Can you fulfill the parameters of your job so you stand out from the pack and succeed and get the project done and deliver the service and deliver the product? Yes, 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 yes. It's all about the yes. So I do fill in a little more information about my history with watching how my parents dealt with working very hard, and they were always saying yes until they could finally say no. But I'll save that for the blog if you're interested, because we need to get right into my next topics. I have a quick book recommendation, and I want to talk a little bit about a podcast recommendation, because today's main topic is about keto or Paleolithic eating, paleo eating. I just watched a documentary that was fantastic. It was on Netflix, and it was called Love Paleo. It's actually, its genesis came from an Indiegogo project. And they talked to these people who have had all sorts of health problems, and they turned their lives around because they started eating more meat and they ate more vegetables. But they cut out the carbs, they cut out the sugar. Many of them ended up going into ketosis and opening restaurants because they were so enthused in writing cookbooks, because they were so successful with their diets. they had health problems, and then they went paleo, ate much the way our ancestors did. Now, I know there's some controversy around, did our ancestors eat that? Weren't they omnivores and they could just eat anything that they could get their hands on? But as Mark Sisson notes in his book, The Primal Blueprint, the point is we know what they didn't eat. They didn't eat sugar. They didn't eat stuff that came out of a box. They ate fresh. They ate organic. They ate stuff that comes from the edge of the grocery store, or stuff they had today, and then stuff that they could forage and hunt. So when you're looking at the healthy stuff in a grocery store, it's often around the edges. It's not in the boxes full of simple carbohydrates, because the more simple carbohydrates that you eat, the more you want to eat them. It's a trick of the body. It's like if you have a complex carbohydrate that is healthy, like an apple, you don't eat the whole bag of apples. However, if you eat a few chips, you want to eat the entire bag of chips. So eating more vegetables, eating meat. I know there are vegetarians and vegans out there. I've got a really good friend who's a vegan who'd be screaming at the at his iPod as he listens to me talk about this stuff. But I've tried other diets, and I found that I was always hungry when I went with vegetarianism, and I was miserable and unsuccessful when I did what's the typical North American diet. For the last 30 or 40 years, we were told to eat higher carb, eat grains, eat legumes, and eat low fat. And I remember very clearly Dr. Bill Cosby, that fake Ph.D. in English, he who insists on being called a doctor, he said, well, you are what you eat, so don't eat fat so you won't get fat. And that is not how the body works. It's if only it were that simple. But we now know that eating paleo has a lot of great benefits. And so I've described the paleo diet. Now I want to talk a little bit about the ketogenic diet, because this gets into my podcast recommendation. I listened to a fantastic interview between Joe Rogan on the Joe Rogan Experience and his guest, who was Dr. Dom D'Agostino. He's a Ph.D. He's an aquanaut. He worked with NASA. He's financed by the War Department. He did really interesting research on ketogenic diets. And with a ketogenic diet, you keep your carbs low enough and your sugar low enough that your body begins to burn fat. And when it does that, you're running your body and your brain on ketones, not on glucose. The effect of that, this is much more complicated, but this is the shorter version. And I'm doing great because I'm only at 8 minutes here. 8 minutes and 30 seconds we're coming up to. So I'm doing great this time. When you are running your body off of ketones, when you're in ketosis, you don't get the insulin spikes that you do with sugar. So you know how you have a sandwich, you want to have a nap after lunch? I certainly did. I find that I have more energy now. I'm more satiated because I'm eating much less sugar. You're cutting out dairy. You're cutting out sugar. You're cutting out bad carbs. You're cutting out stuff that comes from boxes, and you're going back to stuff that I've talked about in previous podcasts, which is the wild diet, where you're eating animals nose to tail. You are eating much higher fat percentage in your daily diet. So I'm not a nutritionist. That's why I curate this stuff and I send you off to check it out. So go watch the documentary Love Paleo, and certainly listen to this interview from the Joe Rogan Experience with Dr. D'Agostino. So benefits of ketosis, of being in ketosis, benefits of the ketogenic diet. Some really surprising and interesting stuff that is really exciting. So I know with paleo, people talked about raising testosterone with men and lowering cholesterol and just losing weight and feeling great. With ketosis, this drills down even deeper. Dr. D'Agostino talked about how a ketogenic diet delivers more energy to the brain. So it's good for a certain percentage of ALS patients, for instance. It is effective in cutting down the number and severity of seizures in children, these pediatric epileptic seizures that drugs couldn't touch. The ketogenic diet did help with. Combating type 2 diabetes, that's a much more common issue that the ketogenic diet can really help with. So lots of really interesting stuff. One note, and I have a note about this in the blog at allthatchazz.com. I think he used a bit of shorthand at one point where he talked about how we have to track macros to make sure that we're running our body on ketones. And when he says macros, he's talking about tracking your carb intake, your fat intake, and your protein consumption. So there's lots of stuff online you can check out, lots of apps. I actually have an app that I want to recommend. I have used intermittent fasting. And fasting, I'm not talking 3 days here. I'm talking about hours. Mr. Powers. I'm talking about hours, but it's not as scary as it could be, because often when I've tried fasting before, I've just been ravenously hungry. However, since I switched to paleo, or the wild diet, all that stuff, where I'm eating vegetables and eating meat, and I have a much higher fat intake, fat is a major percentage of my diet, when I do that and, put a little bit of coconut oil or butter or eggs are great, all in my coffee, because I do allow myself coffee in the morning. That is part of the fast. It doesn't break the fast. It's okay. Tonight, for instance, I stopped eating at about 8:15, and I will break that fast tomorrow afternoon between 1 and 3, probably about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And because I can have the coffee with a little bit of coconut oil, I'm good. I'm not hungry, and because I don't have the insulin spikes, I'm not starving. I actually had my protein tonight, and I feel great. Now, I know recently that there was some research that came out where people talked about the evils of coconut oil, and what it failed to take into consideration from my research that I've done is the length of the chain of the fatty acids. I'm just going to tell you that the shorthand to that is that that study that popped up in Facebook and was shared everywhere, from my research, it doesn't check out. But look into it some more for yourself. Because, as I said, I want to be succinct here and be helpful and point the way to curate stuff for you that you can check out. So you can check out all the links on the blog at allthatchazz.com. Buy the book, Do the Thing, at that same website. I also want to recommend, if you are doing intermittent fasting, and I think I first heard about this from Terry Crews, who I think he's about my age, but he's in really fantastic shape. And what he does is he just eats between like 2 and 10 at night, I think, or 2 and 8 at night. So with intermittent fasting, I explained it's basically I've gone 13 hours, 16 hours, 17 hours. I think I did 17 and a half hours, almost 18 hours at one point, and it was okay. When I do that, I use an app called Vora on my phone, and it tracks the fast. So it's just a simple timer, but you start it, and when you've finished for the night, when you finished eating, and then you stop it. And I find that it has cut down on the calorie intake that I have each day substantially. Healthily, but substantially. It is just, I don't want to stop that timer prematurely, so it really keeps me on track. So I've mentioned Mark Sisson's book, The Primal Blueprint, and I've talked about the link in the show notes being for the Joe Rogan Experience. If you go to allthatchazz.com, you will find a really fun link to a podcast interview that I highly recommend. And I'm going to leave it a secret because I would really want you to, if you're interested in having a fun interview, hearing a fun interview with an action movie star that is truly hilarious, you've got to go to allthatchazz.com. And while you're there, you're going to see links to a bunch of my books. Brooklyn in the Meantime. I usually talk about Do the Thing, but you've heard about that if you are a fan of the podcast. Brooklyn in the Meantime is my criminal autobiography where I talk about going back to Brooklyn in the 90s. And there's mystery, there's adventure, there's stolen jewels. It's a whole thing. You got to check it out. While you're there, you can become a patron at allthatchazz.com by clicking the link to my Patreon page. So do certainly go to allthatchazz.com to check out the fun surprise. I'm not going to spoil it. I'm just going to promise you that if you check out this podcast that I recommend toward the bottom of this show page, truly, you're going to thank me. It's just a gem. It's just fantastic. And I hope you didn't hear my desk rattling too much. Tonight, my family is out. They went on a day trip. I had to work today, and so I just had to squeeze this in. Finally, I need to say something. A lot of you are under stress right now because we've actually had threats of nuclear war. It looks like it's going to work out, but I've listened to a lot of people who have truly felt upset and threatened, and they don't know what to tell their kids, and they're worried, and they've got a lot of stress to manage. So take care of yourself. Do some self-care. Get some social interaction time. Talk to your friends, talk to your family, talk to a professional if you need to, because the disclaimer I always have on this podcast is don't get health advice from a podcast. I'm just here to point you in the right direction so you can do some more research for yourself and find what's right for you. I do not like telling anybody what to do, but I certainly do want to tell you that if you're stressed, there are solutions. If you're feeling anxious, you can seek help from a professional, but talk to somebody. Certainly talk to somebody. Share the load, because sharing is caring. Because we really have to take care of ourselves. Okay? You are precious, you are loved, you are needed, and it's probably going to work out okay. There are checks and balances in the systems. The system is under strain. I had a bit of a... I walked away from social media the last day, really, after the attack in Charlottesville. Very, very sad, and that hit me hard because I thought, do we really have to fight all these fights again? This feels like civil rights fights again, and that is very sad that we're actually talking about Nazis in 2017. I can hardly believe it. My uncle almost died fighting Nazis, and this is a dark and challenging time in many ways, but I actually got off social media after posting about it a lot. If you follow me on Facebook, you know that I don't object to, well, I don't believe in the term social justice warrior because I think it has been co-opted by people who denigrate the values of equality in many ways, fearful people. I like the term social justice champion because I happen to think that social justice is a good and important thing. Anyway, I won't belabor that, and you don't have to believe that to benefit from the stuff we talked about today. You don't have to believe me about anything. I got out, and instead of stewing on social media, I went to a peace rally. And people there stood with the victims in Charlottesville, and especially the woman who lost her life, Miss Heyer. And it was good. It was good to get out. It was good to meet people and share that load. So when you're under stress, don't retreat. Do share the load. You can vent, you can share, you can talk, but a lot of stress management is about fostering connection. And you can go get a massage, you can go for a workout, you can eat better, you can feel better, you can get some exercise. There's all kinds of things that you can do for yourself, but do take care of yourself. And I think I've hammered that message so hard that I am sick of my own voice. So I'm going to leave you with that thought, and I will see you next week. Take care, everybody. And when I say take care, I mean take care of yourselves and each other.